It does.
Or someone said that before?
I would say that the danger is, especially if you're in ISKCON, specifically if you're in ISKCON, the danger would be not to understand who is Prabhupada, what his mission is, the philosophy he taught, the things he prioritized. Because then you could get very confused, and you could emphasize things which are inappropriate, either for you or for the movement in general. So, a lot of it is a matter of what you're emphasizing.
Well, the way that Prabhupada presented the philosophy, especially in the early days, it was in a way that was understandable and easy to understand to someone in America or anywhere who hadn't even heard of Krishna would understand it and think, I want to be converted. And if someone just knows some stories, then maybe that's not enough to convince someone to change their life and become a Christian.
You have to judge by the result. Well, also, let's say hypothetically it were enough, but it doesn't mean that they would necessarily understand the whole concept of the mission of compassion and preaching. They might, they could become selfish also. That's possible. Because the way I see Prabhupada is that everything came in a package. And so the package had many things in it. It's like, we're all going to give you a lunch package, and it's a complete meal. So the sweet is there also. But everything else is there. So, all right, you can have the sweet, but you eat the dal rice and sabji and chapati. Then you get the sweet. So I heard a story recently about why Prabhupada stopped what he was doing and did the Krishna book. And of course, we know that there was this fear that he wouldn't live long enough to do the 10th canto, but at one point, Prabhupada expressed that the realization that nobody in the world understands who God is. They have no concept of it. And this book will explain it. And we have to get that out. So, as you know, Prabhupada got it out with a lot of philosophy. So, it was a rounded meal. So, I personally feel that Prabhupada was very careful in how he explained everything. And I always noticed, even as a young devotee, that anytime Prabhupada explained the right side of an issue or philosophy or emphasized something on this side, he would always balance it out either in the same class or the next day or the next day. So we got the full meal. If he gave us a lot of chapatis at the beginning of the class, he still gave us a lot of dal and rice at the end. That just always stood out. And I kind of felt that from seeing and hearing so many classes and seeing how Prabhupada acted, that I always felt I wanted to understand exactly that balance that Prabhupada was giving and what he was emphasizing and the order he was giving it and how much he stressed each thing, so that when I would teach, I would make sure that same meal and the same balanced proportions would be there for everyone. Because if it's not balanced, it might be good, but they could get indigestion. They may not be able to digest it because there's too much of something. That's been my feeling. And it's not that if you don't do that, what you're preaching is not valid. I would just say it's not exactly the way Prabhupada did it. And I personally am careful. I try to be careful that mood comes across. But at the same time, as a devotee advances, he wants to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and there are books that take you deeper. But how he expresses that to others in the world, that will, he'll have to do that tastefully. in the right circumstance, obviously not to new people. That I was giving this class last week in Vrindavan, and then there's a group of very young people just coming to Krishna consciousness who attended the class. So basically, I just had to kind of stop the class and explain philosophical points because it was too high for them. Like for us, we're relishing it. But, God is crying, God's mother is chasing him with a stick. You just, been a devotee 3 months. That's like, unless you were taking a lot of LSD before you joined, that's like going to be hard to swallow. As hippies, we had that advantage. We kind of could believe anything. After all those drugs, anything was like, yeah. But I also noticed another thing, that the level of Prabhupada's classes in the early days was higher than in the later days because he saw what people could understand. And you see, some of those early classes went high. And
I was listening to song from 1966 and contacting Dr. Rita. Fantastic class. It's really fantastic. I was thinking about people just walking in.
yeah, exactly.
He's giving them Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Yeah, and Teachings of Lord Chaitanya was one of the first books. It was out, I think, in 1969. And Nectar Devotion came out in 1970. So my understanding of that was, if you read about something you don't understand, what you understand is that there's a lot that I don't understand. So it kind of opens you up that there's this reality I didn't know existed, in the unlimited nature of God and the unlimited nature of rasa. And Prabhupada it didn't bother him that we didn't understand it. He just said, keep reading it. So I think he also understood that a lot gets in there that doesn't get in here. And then, someday when you read it again, you'll say, oh, I remember reading that in 1970. I didn't have a clue. But something got in there. That there was something called rasa and Krishna jokes, and there's a humor, and there's fear, and there's this and that. So, but obviously in his classes he didn't go that deep, but he put it in his books. And he told us to read. When that Nectar Devotion came out, he told us to read it every day. And every day we'd stop in the middle of the day and read for like a half hour. The whole thing. Bhakti Shastri doesn't even teach the whole thing because it's so esoteric. And we read the whole thing, 1970. But I think, Prabhupada was, it's like when you have children and your daughter says, or your son says, I want to go over to so-and-so's house, and you go, no, you're not going there. Why can't I go there? No, because they watch television, and they watch this and that, and these crazy movies, and I don't want you over there. So Prabhupada was obviously like that. Don't go to this one, don't go to that one, don't listen to him, don't go to Radhakund. He was obviously very, very careful. Don't read this book. And nowadays, things are much looser. You don't hear that so much. So these are the things that I try to emphasize. Devotees, we should understand how Prabhupada prioritized things, what he emphasized, what he didn't emphasize, a lot of times devotees would ask questions, and he would just say, why are you asking that? Or it's not important, or when you go back to Krishna, you'll understand. And that doesn't always happen now. So I think part of it is cautionary, and I think part of it is healthy, because we're advancing. We want to know more deeply certain things. I don't know if you were aware that when Prabhupada curbed the devotees who were focusing only on hearing about the gopis, he said that if we allow this to continue, it would ruin the preaching. And I think my understanding was because we would turn into sahajiyas. And he said, and he was just envisioning us becoming like these so-called Babajis and Radhakund. That we would become like them, we would be getting women pregnant. That whole scenario, that's how he explained it. Well, he was very, very careful. And what I remember of the early days with Prabhupada was what really empowered our movement was just we wanted to do what would please Prabhupada. And we didn't analyze so much. It was just, will this please Prabhupada or won't it? That was the criteria. It was very simple.
It seemed like the devotees, possibly at the time, didn't know as much as the devotees now, but were very convinced about the little part that they did know,
Yeah.
and they took that on the street, and with that small amount of knowledge, were able to make up the world.
Yeah. Well, I always say they didn't know enough to deviate. Because Prabhupada said if you know too much, he called that overintelligent. In other words, you think you know better or more than your guru. And I always say in those days, we didn't know enough to be overintelligent. Although even Prabhupada said sometimes we were, but I could say personally, I didn't know enough to know how to deviate. And like you say, because our knowledge was meager, we felt more dependent on Prabhupada. And so we clinged on to his instructions more tightly because we felt very vulnerable to Maya. Right? It's just like, unless we cling on to these instructions, we don't know how we'll make it a day to day. So, and also, the other factor was that Prabhupada was directing the movement. We're going to do this, we're going to do this. And we could understand that we didn't know what the next move should be. And we just had to follow, like the general. And because Prabhupada was there moving things forward, we didn't have to think a whole lot. The borders, the paradigms were there. We could think within those paradigms. We didn't have to think outside those paradigms. Everything was pretty clear. So we didn't have to really be overintelligent. When Prabhupada left, then it opens up. It opens things up because now, if we think this way, there's nobody to say, no, get back in. If we think, well, let's just hear about the gopis, you can say, well, now we're older, we can do it. There's nobody's going to stop you. I mean, they can try to stop you, but not like the way Prabhupada stopped us. And so I distinctly remember after Prabhupada left, that was the major shift. There was no one controlling who's going out on either side. And there were so many things that happened during Prabhupada's time. We just had to clamp down on it and say, finish, stop. I'll just give you an example. It's maybe a strange example, but I think it will illustrate the point. I was in a country last year, or earlier this year. They had a big project, and I was thinking, this project is going to be really difficult, and they're going through a lot of struggle and crisis. I was thinking, if I was a GBC, I might even tell them, just quit it. Sell the land and forget the project. I might think like that, which generally nobody does. Right? And you might think, well, that's outlandish. But Prabhupada did those things. If he saw something was going that was kind of eating away at the spiritual strength of the devotees, he just forget it. Just close it, forget it. Don't worry, we don't want it. Stop it, sell it. So, we can't do that so easily now. But Prabhupada would do it. Just keep everything centered. Stop this program, it's deviating us. I was temple president in 1970. We wanted to get a farm, so we were looking for land. We'd had to figure out how to get the money. And our program was to do Harinam Sankirtan every day. There was only 4 of us. That was our preaching. And so now we were looking for land. And I wrote Prabhupada and said, well, we're looking for land, but, we don't really have money now. And he had originally approved the idea. He liked the idea that we could get land. And I said, it seems to be taking us away from Sankirtan. He said, then forget the land. Just like, okay. So no discussion necessary. Call your GBC, have a meeting, Varnashram versus priest, all this ad infinitum controversy, but we need Varnashram, but, no, it's a preaching movement. It's just, okay, forget it, do Sankirtan. So things were easier then, because he was keeping us all very much in line, at least I feel. And I think for many of the older devotees, we see things nowadays and we look at it and we say, there's no way Prabhupada would allow this to go on. But due to situations and sensitivities and whatever, sometimes you can't say anything because you might hurt somebody, right? You might offend a leader, you might offend the second generation. Maybe it'll be seen as discriminatory against a person of color or a woman, or, it's like, so in many situations we become overly sensitive and we could be accused of many things for trying to establish something or correct something we think is wrong. But when Prabhupada was here, he would correct it and everybody would say, okay, that was it, it was over. It was a 1-second affair. You just get the letter and it was it. So that's just I would just say, that's just the dynamic we face today that's different. But I still suggest, as far as possible, all of us should understand Prabhupada's mood. By reading all these biographies, you really understand his mood. Just like if you read Jamuna's book, you understand how much confidence he had in Jamuna as a leader. Because some people think Prabhupada didn't want women as leaders. But if you read Jamuna's book, you see, he gave her so much responsibility. So it just, it clarifies what his mood was. Yes? Yes. As we progress. Yeah. I mean, you could say Prabhupada, obviously he wanted us to go deeper. But at the right time, in the right place, when their appetite is there.
Did Prabhupada say work now, samadhi later?
Yeah.
Did he say that?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Get off your rear end. Don't sit around, chant 64 rounds, 100 rounds. I think there's a he wanted to establish Krishna consciousness. Work hard, you'll be purified. So that in your older age, you'll be ready for samadhi because you've worked. And also, you're young and you have the energy. It could mean many things. I always took it as you'll be qualified for samadhi by working hard. You'll be purified. And that, I think Prabhupada was also concerned that as young men and women we had a lot of energy which could work against us if we tried to just hear and chant because we were so passionate. I mean, obviously if somebody's a scholar, Brahmin, can do that, he could facilitate that to some degree. But for the average devotee, work, burn your energy, spread the movement. And that's also what he wanted. So that's how we could best satisfy him. Yes?
When naturally at the time of when we come to old age, the mind is distracted here. At the same time, the service also will be more effective if we go more into sadhana.
Yeah.
So
I think
balance.
yeah. Sadhana could also be seen as part of his idea of work as well. That's part of the program. But I was thinking, we've seen sometimes devotees like to study a lot and chant a lot. But generally, at least when you're living in a temple, at least during Prabhupada's time, you had service, which was like 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours a day. So you'd have to do your hearing and chanting before and after your service. The hearing and chanting was never really anyone's service. And then Prabhupada said, come to Mayapur, spend a month, get rejuvenated. So the hearing and chanting, of course, it was more the service of the preachers, especially the sannyasis. They might do more. But still, everybody had a full day of service. That was generally, the program. But always emphasizing sadhana. And emphasizing you want to read more, sleep less. Because Prabhupada emphasized a lot, service, spread the movement, open more centers, distribute more books. That was very strongly emphasized. We probably took it too far to neglect our sadhana sometimes. So everything happens in balance. Now, if somebody just wants to hear and chant, that may be okay if they want to be a teacher, because then they can teach it. That becomes their service. So then they need to study a lot. There's another story. It was being preached that we should read every one of Prabhupada's books every day. So like 5 books. Gita, Bhagavatam, CC, Nectar Devotion, TLC. We should study each, not TLC. Anyway, I think there were 5. There was organizing, the devotees were organizing 5 classes a day. So after the morning program, you take breakfast, and then there were like 2 classes. Then you come back in the evening, and there were 2 classes. So it was like about 3 hours extra of classes. So there was a Gita class in the evening and Bhagavatam in the morning, and 3 hours of class. And so devotees were getting out on Sankirtan later and coming back earlier. And so the presidents were thinking, well, Prabhupada didn't say to do this, and it's not a good idea. So they wrote Prabhupada and said, what about this, reading books, all books every day? Prabhupada said, something like, who's the rascal that, typically he might say, who's the rascal that said that, or who said that, I never said that, why are you doing this? It's not authorized. Morning and evening class, read when you have time, and distribute books, do your service. So it's like that. So he chastised. Then, $500 rupees. Goes up. So then there was a problem in the Hawaii temple. I don't know the exact problem, but it reflected some impurity and lack of understanding of Krishna consciousness. Then I was told Prabhupada enacted 5 classes a day there. Because that was kind of like an emergency situation that needed to be purified. So neither, that wasn't standard, but he saw that was necessary for the time being. So then chanting of 64 rounds, Prabhupada encouraged preaching. I mean, people could say now we have a greater appetite and we can do it and so forth. And I don't want to judge anybody. I can only say what was happening during Prabhupada's time, and he didn't encourage that. He encouraged preaching. Well, maybe you can't preach, maybe you're too old. or whatever the situation is. But when they told Prabhupada, well, this devotee is chanting 64 rounds, that no, they said, is that okay? Prabhupada didn't say anything. Then it came up another day. They said, Prabhupada, he wants to chant 64 rounds. And Prabhupada said something very powerful. He said, he wants, when you say, I want, then that's sense gratification. That's even if it's something within devotional service that's not been authorized by your spiritual. If you say, I want to distribute books, that's great, because that's authorized. I want to go to Mangalartik, yeah. But this was, I want, was different than what Prabhupada wanted. And so, what we learned from our experience was the devotees who made the most advancement were just trying to enter the heart of Prabhupada to understand what he wanted. Not what they wanted, not what they felt like doing, as much as what he wanted to do. And then they would fulfill his desire according to their ability and inclination. But I want to chant 64 rounds. If that meant 6 hours of service you wouldn't be doing, then Prabhupada thought that was a personally motivated. But one devotee, it took him all day to chant 16, because he had taken so much LSD. It was, he was the personification of spaced out. If there was ever a deity of spaced out, it was him. And the president asked Prabhupada, what should we do? Prabhupada said, just let him chant. So that was his service. It took him all day to get his rounds done. That was the only service he had. Prabhupada thinking that would purify him so he could eventually chant in 2 hours. I think he got better. From what I remember, he got better. And we had many people in those days who were destroyed by LSD who got better. Like somewhat semi-incoherent, just like very distant. You talk to them and they weren't really there. What did you say that again? What did you say? They'd ask you because they couldn't focus. Now they're sannyasis, gurus preaching, translating Sanskrit, scholars. Then there was this very interesting story. It's so interesting to think about. This, we're discussing this in Vrindavan. This young man in his late 20s was coming to the temple. And then one day he came in a sari. But then he came back a few days later in a dhoti. And he was like going back and forth. And so he wrote Prabhupada and said, what should I do? Eventually he decided to have an operation to become a woman. And Prabhupada just said, choose one. Man or woman, just choose it. And stick to it. And take to Krishna consciousness. So, by hearing these pastimes, you kind of understand Prabhupada's mood. How he was merciful, compassionate, and just wanted to engage everyone. And one other thing I wanted to mention, because I was thinking about this today. I've been reading Jamuna's book, and one of the things you get in Jamuna's book is how much responsibility he gave to her, and how difficult it was for some of the men to acknowledge that she had that position.